Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. How old are you when you moved out to Florida, Chris? Welcome.
Thank you.
You see?
Thank you so
Easiest way to
much.
start.
I was 26 years old, 26 going on 18.
26 going on 18. I feel like a lot of people today are like that, right?
Yeah.
We live in the age of delayed adolescence.
Yeah, and I tried my best to delay it as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that there's like a split between I'm always trying to find this line between, I call it like straddling the line between responsibility and fun,
Mhm.
and like it's such a delicate slope, but like I feel like a life well lived like is has that perfect balance of like, listen, I know a time and place to be responsible, and I know a time and place to just like enjoy. By the way, even while you're engaging in your responsibilities, you could like turn that into fun or enjoyable um events, as long as they're not coming at the sacrifice of the other. And I think that a lot of times people have the hardest time balancing those two.
I can never remember this book, but I remember this part where he talked about like if the United States was really balanced,
Mhm.
if you had the Statue of Liberty on one side, like somewhere in California, you need the Statue of Responsibility.
Oh, nice.
Um,
That's such a good line.
right? Because liberty without responsibility is chaos, and responsibility without some liberty is really boring.
Yeah,
So I
it's
am
crushing.
crushing.
Totally, totally. So you moved out to Florida, 26, going on 18. Why'd you move down?
I moved down here. Um, it was November of 2014 to get sober.
To get
I
sober.
to get sober. I had been in and out of treatment centers through most of my like early 20s and teens. Um,
Started in teens?
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 14, 15 years old when I went to my first treatment center.
Mhm.
Um, and I had been trying to get sober for a really long time, and I just being around the same people, places, and things, being around Philadelphia. I had a year once, I would get like 30 days or 90 days. But something inevitably would happen, or I'd run into that person at the store,
Yeah.
and then I was off again. Um, yeah, and it's interesting. I actually had this conversation with my mom and dad when I had 3 years sober. They came and gave me my medallion.
That's beautiful.
It was a really beautiful night. My mom told me, she said, when you went down there, we knew that you could die, and she's like, not what we ever wanted,
Mhm.
but we knew it wasn't up to us anymore. And I think as like I had hit my bottom spiritually, emotionally, physically, all the stuff, they had reached their bottom as enablers at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that they finally let go. And yeah, and then I finally stood up and grew up,
Yeah.
which
It's,
was really beautiful.
you think it happened out of necessity? You think it was just changing of your settings, stuff like that?
I think it was both. I think yeah, there was it was a perfect storm of things. It was my parents had stopped enabling me. Like, cause I remember I called them, I had 90 days and I was like, I'm ready to come home. And my mom sent me a list of homeless shelters in West Palm Beach. And she's like, yeah, you're not coming back. And
Wow.
like, thank God she did that. At the time I did not feel that way. I was really angry,
I
but
can imagine.
so I think it was that. I had started working with therapists who had finally talked about like the big T word, which no one had ever really talked to me about that before, which was trauma.
Hmm.
Um, I think that made all the difference. I had also made a group of friends who were also sober and became my family, and and just that like beautiful connection, and that was a huge part of it. Um, and honesty. I think for a long time, like I just was hiding from everything and everyone. Um, so yeah, it was this really beautiful storm of events. I finally had like really good treatment, coupled with parents who were done. and a group of friends in a new place where I was away from all my
Yeah.
triggers. Um, and even to like, I think geographical locations to run away from your problems doesn't work. But I think geographical relocations for recovery does. Because I even remember going home at 6 months, a year, and like the dark cloud would come over me
I
again.
could imagine.
And then I would come back to South Florida and I was like, "Ah, I can like breathe." So my body would remember, um, which is really interesting.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I've had very similar experiences for sure. And I've also, it's funny that you say that you can't run away from like your self, your state, I guess, right? I used to go before, while I was still trying to figure out what I was trying to do with myself, before I was married, before I had any kind of direction in terms of work or creative outlet or anything like that. Um, I knew I wanted to find it. I just didn't know how to. And a lot of times it manifested by me just feeling like I had to just break out and go somewhere.
Hmm.
And I would just go for cross country drives, New York to Florida, New York to Washington, excuse me. And sometimes it would be beneficial. I remember one time I did it, and I was driving down to Florida, and like I was driving through the Carolinas, and like I was driving into like a tornado or a tropical storm or something like that, and I just felt like the storm inside and outside matching up, and I was like, I am not doing this out of a healthy place. I'm running away from something, and I didn't even know what I'm like. I remember the realization washed over me like so succinctly, and I was like, I don't know. I'm just trying to run to get out of my own skin, and I don't. And that's not. This isn't the way to do it. Like, this isn't the way to solve my problem. Sometimes getting away is there's something to accomplish by that. But for that particular problem, I was like, this isn't going to solve it. And I ended up writing about that. I'll show you the poem I wrote after. Yeah, it's called "Driving into a Hurricane." And it's yeah. I have ambitions to turn it into a song, but I'm not creative enough yet with my guitar to do that.
Hmm.
So I want this episode or this particular podcast to be something that is informative, educational, and relevant to anyone that's potentially listening to it. Because I think that the topic of porn addiction and sex addiction is taboo, even though, or very taboo for a lot of people, even though it's an issue that everyone
Hmm.
everyone struggles with.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to hear about your experience, and I kind of want to, you could kind of start by telling me how you got into the space and what you see, and we can kind of direct the conversation from there. If that's
Yeah,
cool. Cool.
absolutely. So I came down here, I got sober, and I got my year of sobriety. I
How
immediately,
hard was that?
honestly, like, I mean, it was hard looking back, and I can say this in retrospect, like, um, but it just seemed like things just aligned
Hmm.
perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, so at the same time, it was kind of easy. I mean, I think emotionally it was really hard. Um, but I didn't even have the words to like, or the understanding until years later in like retrospect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that first year was like, just stay sober and like get a pack of cigarettes and a nice coffee like every day.
Did your new group of friends, were they instrumental in that?
Yeah,
Like, you guys would call each other and support each other if you felt you were having a hard time, and
all the time. Yeah.
and what were some, I guess, words of condolence or support that worked, and what are some words, what are ideas that don't work? That for you at least.
Especially during that first year. Um, I think, and I've learned this lesson over the last 10 years, is that the people who help the most are the ones who are just willing to sit with you in it. Um, and I had found people who like didn't try to fix me, didn't try to change me. How I felt wasn't wrong. It just was what it was.
Yeah.
And really taught me how to do that as well.
Hmm.
Um, which made all the difference.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, especially down here in South Florida, it's you can't throw a rock without hitting a treatment center or
Yeah.
a halfway house. Um, yeah, and we just were kind of all in the same boat. And I say this all the time. Like, I remember the halfway house that I lived in. I found a group of men that I didn't know I needed, which made all the difference.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think people's willingness to just sit with you in it and not try to change you or what's going on,
Yeah.
because you can't. It's just you have to kind of go through it.
Yeah. So
Um,
you have to. So you think being understood, or being, you know, like just someone sharing in, like being able to express that you're having a hard time with someone, and someone just being listening, you know, just a
yeah,
receiving end.
absolutely.
Gotcha.
And I think it's really hard to like develop that as a skill, because we want to fix it. I remember I heard someone talk about fixing bias. Like, you'll listen to someone's problem for 40 seconds and you already have the plan of how they're going to get out of it, not realizing that like it's like you needed another 10 minutes to really understand what was going on, and then also that they didn't really want you to fix it. They
Yeah.
just wanted you to know,
Yeah.
you know. And that's such a powerful tool for connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
It's something I struggle with, by the way, because I get so excited about ideas and conversation that I end up being like, "Oh my goodness," you know, and it's hard for me, but I'm working on it.
I have to bite my tongue sometimes, and
Yeah.
I'll have like friends of mine who are just like, "Hey, like I don't need a therapist right now."
Yeah. You can talk back to me.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's I think that was something that really changed everything in the beginning.
Gotcha. So you're sober.
You're sober. I started working in treatment. I I was a overnight tech at a adolescent male facility. I did that for a while. Then I got in. Then I went to the treatment center. I worked at the treatment center that I went to. Um,
Was that weird?
it was. It was like full circle. I'm really grateful that I got to work there. I worked there for 5 years.
Wow.
Um, and I kind of like grew up clinically there. There was phenomenal therapists there at the time that just really taught me a lot of things I know. And what I started to notice was that people would come in for substance use and that they would put down the bottle and they were picking up the phone. Or they would put down the needle and they were picking up massage parlors. Um, and yeah, I started noticing that a lot. Or, you would hear friends who had like 5 years sober who are suicidal and like can't stop going to the Hard Rock, you know? So yeah, I started becoming aware that like process addictions existed.
Can you explain what a process addiction is?
So basically I look at them, it's things outside of substance use. It's the process of it, you know. So I look at like gambling. The goal isn't to win or lose, the goal is to keep playing. And it takes people a long time to kind of figure that out. In fact, I was watching this one thing and they were showing that it's kind of anticlimactic after you pull the lever.
Hmm.
It's like everything leading up to it. It's driving to the Hard Rock. It's fantasizing about buying my mom a new house. It's all of those kind of things. So then when you actually do it, it's the brain's like, I want to go back to the fantasy and everything that was leading up to it. Um, Sex addiction, compulsive sexual behaviors, pornography addiction, um, food is in there,
I can imagine.
compulsive eating, things like that. Um, there's some people who
Shopping.
shopping 100%. I need to get Amazon off my phone.
Dude.
It's a slippery slope.
I can
Um,
imagine. I'm like that with craft beer. And
Craft beer.
there's an app that I use called Tavor, and this app was so dangerous. And basically, the way it works is you put in your credit card, and they would make a compilation of the top like microbreweries from around the country that ordinarily you wouldn't be able to access if I live here and there's a brewery in Wyoming or Seattle or California, and you create your own crate. And they basically have a big warehouse to get all the beer in from these places, and you could pick this collection, and then for one set price, they send you everything, but you pay um, at the time that you add it to your cart,
Hmm.
right? So, for example, if there's a can of an IPA that is, $6, um, I swipe, I swipe, I want it, I pay that $6 now. and then as to my car, and I don't think about it later because so it's a very interesting. You pay in small increments, but then you get one big shipment, and one big kind of dopamine release,
And also those little dopamine
yeah,
releases.
all along the way, and
Yeah.
then there's the notifications, the push notifications. A new one came out, and I'm like, and I looked at my credit card bill a month. I was like, this is what I spend on beer. This is out of control. So I had to delete the app. I never looked back, but I relate. It's slippery.
And there's no doubt in my mind that the creators of that app knew exactly what they were doing with the reward system of your brain.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that just like little pieces along the way, and then boom, you get the big one.
definitely. Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you though. So
No,
yeah, so continue. So anyway, so you were saying, so process addiction is that when people are addicted to whatever process it is, and then getting that result and the subsequent dopamine hit, I guess.
yeah, and the ones along the way. Um, it's I think about someone who's struggling with sex addiction, that it's going to the gas station, it's taking money out, or going to your bank, taking money out. The drive, the now I'm on the internet and I'm looking at reviews for massage parlors, and then I'm pulling up to one. It's the whole thing,
Yeah.
leading up to the very end, and or it's the I'm jumping on a dating app
Mhm.
and I'm swiping and texting for upwards of 8 hours, and sometimes not even meeting a human,
Yeah.
like because their brain is more interested in that 8 hours.
Yeah.
Um, and then when you look at that in retrospect, like I've worked with people who are like, I was doing that like 8 hours a day at work, like at home, sitting at the table with my friends and family. I remember I had a professor once who said and he was quoting somebody else, the mistress lives in your pocket,
Yeah.
you know?
It's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. But the brain can kind of just disassociate like that, and you blink and hours have gone by.
Yeah.
And the same with pornography. It's that looking for the perfect video. And you start at 9 p.m. and you say, well, I have work at 6, so I'm going to bed at 11. And then before you know it, it's like 4 in the morning, and you can hear the birds
Do you
outside.
hear that a lot? You hear
Yeah,
stories about that a lot?
all the time,
Really?
all the time. That they start going and like can't stop, and then sometimes are like, okay, I'm going to chug a Red Bull,
No
take a
way.
shower, and I'm going to go to work, and I haven't slept. Yeah,
Oh man.
absolutely.
So what is that? What? Because listen, I and I'm not even gonna even pretend to say otherwise. When I was in high school, I was definitely addicted to porn. Especially because the first 2 years I was in high school, I was in an all boys school, and I just felt, and there was no, and we could talk about this too. There was no conversation about sexuality or what is going on or what you're feeling or like I'm just like this like incredibly hormonal 13, 14, 15-year old that feels a tremendous sense of guilt every time this happens and at the same time can't pull myself away. And it actually got to the point I was mortally embarrassed, but I'm so happy I did it. Where I went to my mom and I told her to put a block on my phone. I think I was 14, and I was like, I didn't go into any more details I needed to. Mom, I'm looking at things that I don't want to be looking at on my phone. Can you please just put a block on it? And I found ways like 6 months or a year later to even get around those blocks. But just the fact that it was there for me kind of helped keep me like anchor me down a little bit to like have that sense of like, even if you're going to engage in this, like limited guilt wrong, and like, and it was a struggle. I struggled for legitimately struggled for probably 4 or 5 years after that, and I don't think it's ever kicked 100%, but it's kicked 90%, 90, 80, 90%, whatever it is. But there's so much that goes into it, there's so much that goes into it. Do you wanna, so what do you notice? What do people describe when they say, when they're painting the picture that you just painted?
So if I have 12 different clients in a room, like there's 12 different stories.
Okay.
And I really do look at like whatever the behavior is, whether it's porn, sex, um, that is the end of the story. Um, I look at everything from an attachment lens. So how we learn to connect from 0 to 3,
Mm-hmm.
um, how we connect with our caregivers. Sometimes things can happen, and I think especially like in today's day and age when and I see this all the time. Like you see a baby like reaching for like mom or dad, and mom and dad are like looking at a phone.
Yeah.
You know, um, and I one of my favorite writers, therapists, Diane Poole Heller. She talks about it and how the number of securely attached people has been going down over the years. Um, and I think that we're going to see that get worse because of the screens and our relationship with screens. But it could be like my
What would
parent
attachment have to do with it, though? I'm sorry, just to
with
clarify.
so let's say that I develop an anxious attachment. Um,
Which I definitely have. Yeah, sure. Okay, I have my own. Yes. Okay, so let's say I have an anxious attachment to my phone, which I have. Okay.
yeah. Well, and there's a fear of abandonment,
Mm.
or there's a fear of disconnection,
Mm-hmm.
right? This kind of wound that was created. And then let's say you go to school and you've had some events that kind of reinforce that, right? Like maybe the kids were mean to me, maybe I was bullied, things like that. Um, and then one day I turn on the computer at a friend's house and I see whatever it is in front of me.
Yeah.
The brain doesn't differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. Like the brain thinks that those are real people in the room.
Okay.
Um, and porn won't reject me. Porn won't leave me.
Right.
I
You're the hero all the time.
absolutely, yeah. And then I think of like, let's say, like you have more of an avoidant attachment, and you've been really struggling to connect
Yeah.
with other humans throughout your life, and then you find like cam sites where you get to play a role and you get to be that hero,
Yeah.
right? With these people. It's yeah, it makes sense when you kind of line it all up like that with each person that I work with.
So
And
generally filling a void.
filling a void, but also doing your best to connect. And especially when I see it become really addictive, I think it becomes a form of connection and intimacy. That is a lot easier and safer than going on a date with a person,
Mm-hmm.
possibly getting rejected.
Sure.
Um, and especially like how you were sharing that growing up and nobody kind of sitting down with you and saying like, "Hey, there's a lot of things going on with your body right now," right? And this is what all this stuff is. I don't think I've said this to you last week. I don't think I've ever had a client who where somebody explained to them what was happening with their body and sex and all these things. Um, and we all turned to the internet
Yeah.
to
Which is the
find
least healthy place to learn about what that is.
exactly. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And I mean, have you ever heard Scott Galloway talk about the loneliness epidemic that's been happening with men? I mean, I want to actually ask you about your experience in terms of men versus female, or men versus women in terms of their addiction and even maybe their patterns or like the root causes of where like. Are there certain things that men are more inclined towards as opposed to women, or are men trying to look for a different thing than women are? I mean, I think that, and also, by the way, like what you said about the potential not rejection, I feel like porn as a virtual space as opposed to an in-person sexual addiction is two very different forms of, like, even though they're both sexual, they're both very different manifestations of a way to kind of get your high, I guess, or get your, you know.
Yeah. I agree. Like so connecting with someone versus just watching a video.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like you're having another human being there, and like whether or not like you're, whether or not you have a relationship with them or not, or to what extent you will in the future or not. Like there's another person here right now that you're with, in an intimate way, as opposed to I'm in my bathroom alone with the blue screen, and that's a totally different world. And I feel like one tends to like, I feel like sitting alone in the bathroom with a blue screen tends to lend itself towards guilt and shame far more. I don't know more, but I would imagine that'd be more than if I had like an interconnected relationship, like something that's physical. I don't know. I mean, I'm asking. I'm just spitballing. You know,
Yeah, well,
thoughts.
and I think of like how like that becomes part of it. Like we can we can eroticize emotions. We
Yeah.
in the sense that like um here I am in the bathroom and I'm feeling guilt and shame and I'm not having relational sex because I'm with like I'm having some like a relationship with a screen. But the emotions of guilt and shame that come up can sometimes become part of the process.
Yeah.
Um and it's because it's happening over and over again where like that actually becomes eroticized. Right. And
Yeah.
then when I have relational sex with like a partner or something and like those don't exist, it's it's like my brain and my body kind of want to go back to the thing that we've been doing
Oh,
over and over and over.
interesting. So you're associating that particular activity with the emotions of guilt or private or shame or, isolation as opposed to sharing and loving and, and connection.
Yeah, it's I see that all the time where like that becomes sexualized and wanted, at least like unconsciously,
Yeah.
and then sometimes consciously, and you kind of get into all these other categories of like power exchange and things like that, where people are just kind of trying to recreate the thing that got wired into their
Hmm.
arousal template. Like I use this example a lot is like, um, sometimes people can get caught masturbating when they're young, um, or their parents explain sex in a really shameful way. And then they find themselves exploring sex in a really shameful way.
Right. Because that's the groundwork that was the foundation that was laid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of if my first if my f- I'm going through puberty and my first experiences of being sexual are with screens, how like and I think of an arousal template as like a dark room. All I'm doing is shining a light on the corner, which is screens and pornography, not realizing there's this whole other part of my sexuality, and I'm just reinforcing it over and over and over again, and it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and escalates.
Yeah.
And yeah, not realizing, and then I get people who are no longer like even attracted to real humans or relational sex because it has taken a hold. I hope that I feel like I went a lot of different places.
No, no,
So
that's
I hope
okay.
it's
Yes,
like
yes, yes,
answering
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is. I remember actually hearing for the first time in high school about something like that, where there's a guy that was that spent so much time watching porn that like, and there was a girl in the school that was known to be very, very attractive, and they ended up trying, hooking up or whatever, and like he just couldn't, it didn't work,
Yeah.
and that's when I was like, and I heard about that, and I think I was either a junior or senior in high school. And I was like, this is why I'm scared of that stuff, like, and I remember it striking me like, I don't want that to be the case. And also I've noticed that, especially in high school, um, it creates an unhealthy association relationship with just women in general, that like you walk around school and like every girl isn't just a girl. They become a potential for some kind of, or a manifestation, representation of some kind of sick, unhealthy sexual fantasy that is drawn up again based on your relationship with the screen that has no correlation to reality.
Absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Um, and I cannot tell you how many times, like in couples work, where like those conversations needed to be had of like, I am a human, I am your wife, or I am your husband.
Yeah.
And I know that like you had this expectation that our sex life would match this thing that is curated, produced. The
Seriously.
people in it don't even look like that in real life.
Hmm.
Um, and it is marathon Olympic style sex.
Yeah.
Um, and now here we are as like two humans who um, do not match that and are falling short in that. And it's like, it's an intimacy killer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it dehumanizes the partner as
Yeah.
because you're not this thing that I've been watching all this time.
Yeah.
And then I think it like moves people away from intimacy, connection, being seen, authenticity, all those things, which are vital in that process.
Do you want to continue down the couples road, or do you want to go back to men versus female in terms of their? We'll get to both.
Men and
Whichever one.
female.
Men and female. Cool. Talk to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've seen men and women experience
Do
things.
men have a bit higher tendency to be addicted to porn as opposed to sexual, like physical encounters? Do you notice that one is more likely than the other in terms of genders?
I'm speaking mostly just out of my practice.
Mhm. That's all you can do.
Well, and I'm sure there's like tons of research on this. And in fact, I know there is. I
That's all right.
don't have anything to bring up for you. I just know in my practice that I tend to see men more in the sex and pornography addiction, and then I see women more in like the love addiction
What's that?
categories. Love addiction is that is but I also see them. It's in both genders. A lot of work that like Pia Melody did really explores this. It is born out of attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you will have sometimes like an obsession develop around another human.
Yeah.
Um, I keep going into these relationships with the same type of person.
Ah.
And it is really toxic and it is harmful to me. I'm praying that they're going to change. Um, it's interesting how like it sets up in the brain. Do you know how like slot machines work?
In terms of what?
Winning and losing.
No.
So if you with a slot machine, if somebody like wins every 5 tries, they're going to stop playing
Mm.
because it's like no longer exciting. The win needs to be random.
Gotcha.
So you'll win on your 20th time or your 5th time. Yeah, it gets boring and people will stop playing. I think love addiction works the same way, as in like my partner is going to be so kind to me and loving on a Tuesday night, and then I'm going to have 3 weeks of like
Oh, I see
them
what you're
being
saying. And then they get, and then he comes home one night with flowers, and you're like, "This is the best thing ever."
yes, and he's like, or she is,
Yeah.
doing the bare minimum. Um, and then it's like weeks of like awfulness, and so you can see a pattern like that develop sometimes.
That'd be called the love addiction.
I would put it in that category.
Gotcha.
I've seen it work in where people are, you know, they're interested in several partners. Um and it's more for the like the emotional and the romantic part.
Mm-hmm.
Um or they've never actually been single. They kind of jump from relationship to
I see.
relationship.
Sure.
Um I see a lot of like anxious attachment wounds that get triggered in that.
So
Um,
it seems more emotional based, like a more like in search of like an emotional dopamine hit as opposed to what porn would provide, which would be just more of like a physical like getting it out, just get it out there kind of thing.
yeah. I also like to give you other examples of it is like there can be screens involved because it's the I texted you 50 times today and I just want you to text me back.
Yeah.
And that's the like, please see me.
Yeah.
See me, see me, see me, see me, see me. Or I'm stalking your social media.
Yeah.
And I'm downloading these apps where I can look at your social media without you knowing I looked at it. Or people who are putting like it there's a whole spectrum of it. But it can be really, really just as devastating as sex and porn too.
I could imagine, right?
Yeah,
Because it just completely unravels you.
absolutely. Yeah. And you lose yourself. And then the betraying myself over and over and over, like for to get that dopamine hit of like, okay, they're coming home with flowers today,
Mm-hmm.
or I develop a fantasy that isn't really true. There's another part of this limerence, which is I develop feelings and I fall in love with a fantasy and potential versus who the person really is.
Yeah.
And that it's like unrequited love. It's not being returned. And like I said, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and imagined. And if I spend all day daydreaming about all these beautiful, magical qualities of a partner,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really exist, and I become addicted to that, right? Um, yeah, it's I remember someone told me this, I loved how they said it. They said, "Falling in love with someone's potential is really horrible because, first of all, it's a future version of them that doesn't exist,
Correct.
and it's more about your value system that you're placing on them."
Correct.
So I see that a lot sometimes in love addiction too, which is like I'm assigning all these magical qualities to somebody and I'm falling in love with the version in my head versus who they actually are.
But you don't think we all kind of do that to different degrees, or you think that there's just healthier ways and unhealthier ways to do that?
I think we do. And I don't want to pathologize that for everybody. It's, when it becomes something else, like when it goes to that next level.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, okay, I've had 5 of the same relationships and this feels really compulsive at this time. And I'm doing the same thing over and over again where like I am getting high off a fantasy and not who this person actually is.
Right.
Or I find myself like dating the same kind of person over and over and over again because I'm recreating a traumatic thing that happened before. And now it's become compulsive. And this person is not that great. And I'm going back to get that hit,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what are some techniques that you do to help these people, if you can?
Um, so there's a lot.
Yeah. I know it's a loaded
um,
question. Yeah.
so I'm an EMDR certified therapist. I'm in training right now for somatic experiencing, and I love IFS and
What's IFS?
internal family systems,
Okay.
Schwartz. It's parts work. It's one session I might have somebody sitting across from their addiction, having like a real conversation with it. Um, Another session I might be targeting traumatic memories that play a role in this as well. There's also a really interesting protocol in EMDR that I've been playing around too with, especially with porn addiction, where you can kind of desensitize um, the like somebody who is experiencing like the good aspects um, of what they're doing. And it's like, so sometimes with EMDR, we look at it like, okay, you're desensitizing, in the body, all of these things that come up with negative memories. But then like I look at my addiction and we can go, it's Perel's, her, her, she developed a whole procedure for doing it where you can go in and start to desensitize some of the stuff around the addiction.
Meaning desensitize what is attractive about the addiction, or
Absolutely.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So you can push yourself. Is it so? It's kind of getting yourself repulsed by or desensitized to what it is that you're.
Not repulsed, but like desensitizing like the reactions in the body.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and like the triggers that come around with that. Um, I'm somebody who does a lot of work with attachment. Um, Meaning like I we have a blueprint for what our insecure attachment is and how that plays out. And it takes a while, but it's developing that blueprint of what more functional attachment looks like.
Right.
You know, an example is like if I'm working with somebody who is kind of more in the love addiction area and they come in and they're like, I don't think they're that interested in me anymore. And I want to like, you know, text and call a million times and confront them. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And like, let's really sit with that. And what you discover is like, hey, maybe this is more of your perception versus like the facts that you've presented. Um, or if I'm working with someone who's like on the avoidant spectrum and they're like, hey, I'm really overwhelmed and I got the ick by this person and I'd rather go watch porn because that doesn't give me the ick and it's
Yeah.
safe. I'm like, well, are they really like, is what they're doing like grounds for that? Or like, are you just having a reaction to old wounds?
Right.
Um, so it's kind of doing that work too. I also work with the 30 task model, which
30, you said? 30 times.
30 task model, which Carnes developed. He had noticed that when he worked with addicts, the ones who had done all these tasks stayed sober and had a great life.
Cool.
The ones who didn't,
Really? What are some of them on there?
In the beginning, it's breaking through denial. Um, it's one of the reasons why I love assessments so much. So I'll assign somebody an assessment, and it's we have the SDMI, which is the sexual digital media inventory, the SDI, which is the sexual dependency inventory. These paint this really beautiful picture that we can't argue anymore. One of the things about addiction is compartmentalization, which is I can act out on my addiction on a Tuesday and like completely disassociate it like from it on a Thursday. Um, it is when people who would sit there and say, I never want to do this again. I have all the motivation in the world. And then a week later, they cannot recall that.
They cannot recall that regret.
Yeah, or that like I want this.
Yeah.
I can't pull up. It's we call it like a built-in forgetter, because the brain and that reward system is going to make us remember the 12 good times and not the 50,000 horrific times,
Sure.
right? So I think it's a really wonderful tool to start breaking through that denial. Um, there are aspects of it where like we're working through the trauma. Um, we're looking at the arousal template. And then the really beautiful parts towards the end where like we're working on like what does healthy dating look like?
Yeah.
What does healthy sex look like?
Yeah.
Um, what is what feels healthy, what doesn't feel healthy to me. I remember someone said this to me a long time ago, like, um, what is a spiritual orgasm?
Yeah.
And that is when my orgasm aligns with my beliefs, my values. I'm not using it to disassociate. I'm not using it to get away from my feelings.
It's not numbing. It's a culmination of experiences.
Absolutely. And that is my favorite part about this work is helping people get to a place um, where they then can have a really beautiful, healthy sex life,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of it is and I know that this happens by my own like myself, and I think that and, this is actually for different vices at different points in my life, where sometimes something will just happen, like I just need to go like smoke a cigar, I need to just go have a beer, I need to go like, smoke a J, or you know and then a lot of times I will rechannel. I'll make the effort to rechannel my response to a negative event into something a little bit more healthy or productive, right? So, for example, I started forcing myself to wash dishes when I got frustrated. So like if I had like a bad argument with someone, instead of going and taking two or three shots, I would, which I didn't do like on a regular basis, but like. Um, instead of doing that, I go to the guy, like I'm having a conversation. I can't believe this guy's such a douche. I hate this guy, and I hang up the phone and this customer sucks, or I'm pissed off at my boss or my dad or whatever it is. I hang up and I go to the sink. I just wash every dish in the sink, and I'm like, okay, like, like it wasn't that bad. You're fine, but like, at least that's a behavior that I feel like I could kind of like redirect my frustration towards something that's a little healthy. Do you spend a lot of time trying to redirect people's associations from, you know, like there, I feel like part of what an addiction is that there's almost like a breakdown in your day or in your schedule that is that's not, that you don't expect or not foreseen, and then you have to fall back to something familiar or comfortable that to respond to that. Unless I'm making that up, but that's what I feel like I experienced personally.
Well, and it's looking at that's I really loved how you framed all that. I'm gonna start washing dishes when I get
You
frustrated. Um,
could do you could vacuum too,
there's a lot of things to that. So one of the things that I do in like the sex, love, and like pornography realm is like we come up with this thing called a three-ring circle, and in the middle, and this three-ring circle, it is a live document. It changes.
Mhm.
What is red today might be yellow tomorrow. What is green today might be yellow tomorrow. And it's something that I am constantly working with people on and revising. But red is essentially like these are the behaviors that I need to stay away from.
Mhm.
Like looking at pornography, um, calling escorts, like whatever the things are, right? Your yellow is proceed with caution. Like I have to have a plan. Right now, going to the gym, it's not a red, but like it could be because there's a
Really?
lot of um there's a lot of attractive people, there's pheromones in the
Yeah,
air,
yeah.
right? Like I've had people who are like, you know what, I can only go to a women's gym or I can only go to a men's gym. And right now a co-ed gym is red for me.
Really
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I go there and then the process starts and then I'm like back at
interesting.
home and
Interesting. Right, right,
I
right.
can't help myself. So it's looking at being very real with yourself. In 6 months, you might be like, you know what? I've really desexualized the gym and I feel really safe
So, gyms
going
would
there.
be more into a yellow or green zone.
It can move,
Right.
right? And then it's, you know, you're 2 years in the sobriety and you are going through a lot of things. You could
That's a
have a,
fascinating tactic. That's a really, really cool tactic. I love the sound of that actually.
yeah. Well, and let's say,
Because it's organized and it lets and there's like different zones where like you can like at least know proceed with caution, or like,
have a
hey,
plan,
yeah, 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 yeah. And you could really, really you can plan around that. Like it's really, really interesting.
100%. And it moves. And I look at the green zone as like these are things that are really healthy. These are things that support my recovery. I look at them in different sections. Like you think of sex and food, right? They're very sensual addictions. The
Mm.
way things look, smell, hear, like all the sizzle when you're
Yeah, sure.
watching a commercial, right? These are very sensual addictions. How am I going to experience my senses now in a healthy way? Because I'm not just like I just gave up the thing that hijacks my brain. Um, and I've had clients who are like practicing mindfulness at the beach and they're touching the sand and like they're smelling new candles and like just really getting into, yeah, I have these God-given senses that like got hijacked by this thing, but there's so much in this world that I want to experience that is
Yeah,
really safe. I'm going to go to football games now and use my sight in a way that is really exciting and fun. And I'm with
yeah.
my friends, maybe I'll go to the bathroom during the cheerleader part. But
Yeah.
yeah, and even like that gym example of it becoming green, let's say you go through a really traumatic event, like a parent dies, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I have to put this back into the yellow because right now I have all this stuff going on.
Oh, interesting.
And that's a couple years into sobriety, and I'm using that as like a loose example.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's an honest self appraisal of where you're at, and knowing yourself that things need to move, and then having a plan for when they do.
I think that one of the biggest challenges in this particular realm of addiction is honesty. Um, we want to talk about not only honesty. Can you define, or at least tell me what you think the difference is between shame and guilt? And then why we have such a hard, why you think, or why based on your, what you've seen, we have such a hard time being honest about this as opposed to anything else. Um,
Mm.
because like shame and guilt are definitely enormous components of it. And I've had so many times in my own life where it's felt like it's built up and I felt like I had to say something. And when I haven't, it's terrible. And when I have, it's like just a massive release and just like a break. And like, I got that off my chest and the world didn't end. Then like, I could say that I was having a hard time with this and like, people understood.
Mm.
Like, I feel like it's such an isolating, and I think just because the action itself is like so private and so isolated that you feel like you don't want to ever express it. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is something that addiction does across the board.
Okay.
It convinces not only the person addicted, but the entire system around them that you are the only ones in the world that are struggling with this and nobody can know.
Yeah.
Because if they do know, what are they going to think of you?
Yeah.
I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to be pushed out of a group, right? Um, it's interesting. The same part of your brain that lights up if you break your leg is the same part of your brain that lights up if you are pushed out of a group, if you are rejected.
Really?
And it's like from an evolutionary standpoint,
Yeah.
it's we needed to be part of a group in order to survive. So I think in some ways it can be pro-social, like guilt can be very pro-social. Shame is not something shame gets people into the room with me sometimes. Where like the guilt and shame from this has built up so much that they're like, I have to do something.
Yeah.
Right. Um, I also believe that if it's not managed and shame isn't reduced eventually, that these things can build up until you use again. Because it'll like if I feel crappy enough long enough, I'm going to give myself permission to do what I know is going to provide relief, even temporarily.
Oof.
You know,
Yeah. Succinctly put.
So, and I take this from like the work of Brene Brown, like guilt is I've done something bad, and shame is I am bad. And if you knew this thing about me, you would know that I was bad too, and you wouldn't want to be around.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So guilt is kind of what other people think. What would other people think if they knew I did this? And shame is like, I don't want anyone to know that this is really who I am.
I would put both of those on shame.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like guilt too of like
So what guilt? So like, I mean, the stereotypical example of guilt is Jewish guilt. Right? You got Jewish mothers and grandparents and guilt and stuff like that. How do you define guilt like that?
So I had Catholic guilt.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So I'm
It's
sure.
very similar.
I'm sure it is.
Growing up that way. So
Do you still have it, you think?
yeah, I will always have that ingrained in me. It doesn't run my life anymore.
I'm trying to fight it. I try to fight it so hard. It's so hard to freaking fight. And like there's times just when you think you cleared the hump, you're like, oh man, it's still there.
It's so I think naming things is really important in this work. Because there are so many, like you can get the same feeling for so many different things. Like guilt, I'll break that down. Like there's maximizing guilt,
Okay.
which I think Jewish and Catholic guilt come along in that, which is I'm gonna beat myself up consistently as a way to atone for what I did. And if I'm not beating myself up, it's almost like what I did was okay. Then there's minimizing guilt, which is like I feel really guilty for what I did, and I'm gonna go watch 12 hours of Netflix and eat a bag of chips, or I'm gonna go drink, or I'm gonna go use, or I'm gonna go look at porn, and then I don't have to feel it. There's
You're numbing it.
yeah, numbing it.
Okay.
There's weaponized guilt, which is fascinating and
Yeah.
exists in a lot of family systems, and that's where scorekeeping comes along. Like, hey, I'm going to remind you of all the things I've ever done for you. Sometimes moms lovingly
Do that.
do that, where it's like you're setting a boundary with me, but I gave birth to you,
Yeah.
right? So, I think we're taught that, and it's also it's a manipulation tactic where like I'm going to get you to change your mind. So I'll bring up not only all the things I've ever done for you, but all the things that you messed up on in the last year.
That's why I don't take favors from anyone unless I trust them. Like
Absolutely.
if you're not a very, very close friend, I'll never ask you for anything. I'll never ask you how do I look. I'll never ask you what you think it is. I'll never ask you to, do you mind grabbing me a bag of ice while you're in Publix? Like I will never ask anything because I don't want it held over my head. I don't want that being weaponized, like you said.
Yeah.
It's such a yeah. Okay, so there's weaponized
Which
guilt.
shows that like you've had that happen.
You know what's funny? I actually don't know if I did. I actually think so. So it's interesting. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think that the root of that particular type of guilt is that not guilt, but I guess that particular type of avoidance. I don't want to like ask favors and stuff. Is because I used to depend on other people to to tell me I'm good enough, to validate me. And at a certain point, I was so sickened with myself, how little self-esteem I had in myself, and how much I depended on other people, that I did the full 180 turn. I'm like, I don't need anyone. I'm only depending on myself. And now I'm trying to get back into obviously the healthier place is to be in the middle ground, But
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't think I've really. My parents both try extremely, extremely hard to let us be us and do what they do as parents because they want to do it as parents and not because it's an exchange. So I grew up with a pretty healthy perspective, attitude in terms of that. But I think I just saw it around a lot, and I was like, this is not something that
I want to be a part of.
no, very far from it. Very far from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to like put that on moms. Like I see dads do it too.
It doesn't. Yeah, but moms are
Yeah.
are stereotypical. Yeah, example.
And then there's survivor's guilt, which is very simply like I'm okay and you're not. I saw that come up so many times when I used to do a lot of work with first responders and veterans.
Wow.
Just that like I'm okay and they're not, and the guilt that comes along with that. There's these other things that feel like guilt and shame. Humiliation can feel like that, and embarrassment can feel like that. I've see it a lot where a client will be like, yeah, I'm feeling really embarrassed. And then when we really dive into it, it's like, no, it's actually shame.
So what would be the difference? What's embarrassed as opposed to shame?
So embarrassment is like, I've walked in here, I tripped and fell. We both laugh. I know I'm not the only person that's ever happened to. And I get over it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, Shame is I walked in here, I tripped, and I'm like, God, you're an idiot. Right. And humiliation is I walk in here, I trip, I fall, you make fun of me, and there's an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and all of those can kind of register the same way in the body, but all that different forms of guilt, and they're
Wow.
all
Yeah.
vastly. So naming things, I think, is like one of the most powerful tools we have.
It's such an important technique because it also creates. I think words are so amazing because they contain context to them. You know, you can use a word and like you can use one word and everyone imagines a scene that goes with it. Like you could say one word captures an entire, you know, it could be minutes or months or years of an experience that are like boiled down into one word. And the more nuanced we get with them, the more specific we could be. It's really, really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love language right? Like, because of that. I observe a lot of that, like the root word, like impressed. If you're impressed by someone, it means they've literally pressed themselves into you, and you are now aware of that. You know, or delighted is like you are now feeling light, and you know the emphasis on the root word of like light and
Or awesome.
feeling or awesome. Yes, which
Awe
could be in awe of something. Correct. Yeah, exactly. There's yeah, when I've spoken to people, like you're awesome. I'm like, and not in the lazy way, and like I am like in awe of what you've done, you know. And it's such a more beautiful way of putting it. I feel like, you know, even though awesome is fun. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so you have all these different types of guilt, guilt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then I think like what you mentioned, which is, the shame is trying to convince me that like I'm the only person in the world who has this, and I can't talk about it because if I talk about it, then what are people going to think? All the stuff, right? The fear of rejection, all those things, and then I do talk about it, and the relief I feel when I'm met with like love and kindness. It's why I love like 12-step fellowship so much, because they exist, and you can go in thinking that you are the most horrible person in the world, and then there's a woman or a man sitting next to you, and they're like, yeah, I did the same thing, dude, like
yeah,
you're fine.
yeah.
um and the relief that comes with that, I've had so many times in sessions where someone comes in with a very specific compulsive behavior, sexual behavior, and they think that they're the only person in the world who has done that. And I'm like, hey, like, there are a lot of other people who've struggled with this very specific thing too. And it's such a relief. And then when you like, we jump into Google and you're like, yeah, see, there's like this whole world out there,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? So that starts to reduce the shame. I also look at like, where's the shame coming from? Was it ever really mine to begin with? Did I inherit it from society? Did I inherit it from my parents?
Yeah.
You know, I have a lot of shame around sex, and then you start diving into sexual history, and then like a genogram of like the sexual history and family members. And it's like, actually, my grandparents, my parents, they've all felt a lot of shame around sex because of how, like, that's what they taught me.
How would you know that though? How did someone figure that out?
So it's what happened when you first talked about sex with a parent.
Right.
um, they yelled at me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and then when I got older and these topics were safer because we were adults, they told me that their parents yelled at them, right? And how this,
I
like,
see. Yeah.
it gets passed down.
Yeah. So it's a form of education, and it's a bad form of education.
Absolutely. And you begin to realize like this shame that I have struggled with was never mine.
Mm-hmm.
It was just given to each new generation.
Yeah.
Because that's what they thought was the best thing to do.
But even that is still a tall hill to get over. You know,
Yeah.
like you could like there's one thing it's one thing to understand the root of it, and there's another thing to conquer the root of it. And I feel like a lot of times we give ourselves license to because we understand the root of something, like, oh, now I understand myself, and you kind of just keep on going ahead and doing now that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. My dad my dad didn't have a dad, so he did X, Y, and Z, and so now I'm pissed off. I'm not going to do anything about it. I just know that that's the root of it, and that's why he's such a dick to me. And you're like, well, that doesn't really help. Get get you from point A to point B necessarily.
Absolutely. And
That's where the work comes in.
and the work does, and sometimes it's building insight into it, and then also like another part of EMDR which I really love. Like part one is we're going to desensitize traumatic memories in the body, um and part two is like these negative beliefs or cognitions, we weren't born with them, um, that they're usually attached to memories. And part two of EMDR is we want to go in and we want to help adaptive information in the brain kind of sink in. So, like, you ever have that experience where, like, I know I'm a good person cognitively, but sometimes my body
Yes,
feels like I'm not good enough?
all the time.
I have watched EMDR connect the brain and the body in a way where it's like people will look at me after we're done reprocessing the memory. Right before, they would have told me that's not true. I am not good enough. And then after the session, they're looking at me and they're like, I can bring up that memory now and know that I'm good enough.
Right.
Like it switches in the brain and the body. So I think that there's a lot of work, and talking about it and having insight about it, can be great. And it's half the battle. We can't do anything if we don't know about it. But there's also a lot of interventions and different modalities that can kind of go in and really help that go along. So it's not just cognitive. It's like I feel that too.
Yeah. I wonder how breath work would kind of help. And I think that the breath work can help open up those neural connections that you can kind of help reassociate. I wonder if breath work, to reassociate memories and stuff like that, or reassociate your experiences would be something beneficial to implement, because it's not only because I mean, what essentially a lot of this is associating with memory and activity, like you just said, and so and part of the hardest part of all of this stuff is the rewiring, right? That's the PTSD, that's the trauma, that's all this stuff is like you have all these connections that are all starting from one place and ending in another that are rooted in unhealthiness, but you could just kind of retrace that road, the road, and make have it lead somewhere else.
Absolutely. I'm not as knowledgeable as in breathwork as I wish I
Oh,
was.
try it out. Have you ever tried it?
I have tried it. I know a couple really amazing practitioners. It's something that I like. I want to do more of in my journey. But I'm a huge fan and open to anything that will help people rewire their nervous system.
I love that.
Yeah,
I
and
love that.
whatever that looks like. And I've had clients who've gone to breathwork practitioners and loved it.
Yeah.
Thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm a huge fan of anything that can help rewire us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a bathroom break for 2 seconds before we continue?
I'm okay. Do you need to?
Yeah, I'm going to take a 2 second break.
Yeah. Please.
That the other thing that you mentioned, we're back, is the other thing that we were talking about, or that I want to bring up before we talk about couples, is your experience with different age groups, and like what are I guess common themes I guess would be between like teenagers or kids that are just getting exposed to this, as opposed to young adults, as opposed to like adults well into their marriages and relationships and stuff like that. And do you find that um that the motivations, I guess, are different as people go through different phases in life, or the way that it manifests is different as they go through different phases in life? Like, what have you noticed from your practice?
So one, I generally like I don't work with people under 18.
Okay, is
Um,
that for a
and
reason?
well, especially with like this stuff. One of the things that they kind of really put into me during when I was training to become a CSAT was like we don't want to pathologize or like especially someone who's going through learning about their sexuality. Um, it's a lot of it is like normal exploration. So it's an area of like where especially under 18, it's we don't want to over pathologize things because they're still trying to figure it out.
Right.
I know people who do work with people under 18, and I think that they are the most patient and amazing people in the world.
You have to be, because imagine an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old getting a hold of a smartphone. I think the average age that people are starting to be exposed to porn is like 10 now.
Yeah, absolutely. And see this. I remember in one of the trainings, Patrick Carnes was leading it, and he was talking about how criteria for addiction is now being developed for like prepubescent. Whereas before, like we have criteria for addiction for teenagers, for adults, things like that. Um, and I think I told you this. I remember he said this, and it blew my mind. We've had more mass shootings in the 21st century than we've had in the entirety of the 20th century, and they are almost exclusively done by children.
It's the sickest and saddest statistic I've heard in a very, very, very long time.
And it kind of wakes you up to like, never before have we seen this, and
You think it's the violence that we're exposed to at an early age? You think it's the loneliness? You think it's the what do we like? I know it's a packed question. I know that
Yeah.
even trying to answer like in one bit and not getting the whole picture obviously will get you under fire. I don't want you to get under fire, but like
Yeah, well, it's such a good question, and the truth is I don't know, right? Like, but like, what comes up for me when I sit with it is never before. Like, we now have kids who do not remember what life was like before screens.
Mm.
Like, we have humans on this planet who do not remember. Um, we have secure attachment kind of steadily going down.
Sure.
I saw this Johan Lahiri, his TED talk. He cites a couple things. He said the amount of floor space, he was citing a study, the amount of floor space that a person has in their home has been steadily increasing since the 1950s. And the amount of face to face connections that people have has been steadily decreasing. So I look at it kind of from a macro point of view, like there are so many different things going on,
Yeah.
right? Like growing up, like people would knock up for you, right? Now sometimes someone calls me and I'm like, yo, why didn't you text first?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think the way that we are a social species that is neurologically wired for connection. Um, and I think for a lot of us, like it's really hard nowadays.
Hmm.
And these things that were supposed to be agents or vehicles of connection, I think actually are taking us further away from each other.
I know. It kind of scares me that Mark Zuckerberg is still standing by it so strongly. Like I've heard an interview from him recently. I think it was on Theo Vaughn, and one of the things he just kept on like he's been saying the same thing for like I've heard him speak on a bunch of podcasts in the last 5-10 years, and he's been saying the same thing every time, and he just keeps on demanding and insisting that like his apps and his companies are used to connect people and that this is like the way of the future and this was healthiest and best for people and like sure people used to have a group of 5 friends and now they have 250 friends on Facebook. You're like that doesn't mean that you have like friends, that doesn't mean that you're getting what you need as a human being in terms of attachment, in terms of relationships, and
100%.
and it scares me that he and everyone else that's developing all these technologies are just marching forward on that presumption that this is all good, and so we're just going to keep on building on that foundation. When I don't, I'm skeptical as to the initial hypothesis. Even like I'm skeptical as to the fact that that's a good that's a valid substitute.
And my first thought with that is, Philip Morris told us for a long time that cigarettes were healthy for us.
Yeah.
You know, and when your product is the people who are the eyes of the people who are watching, or
Mm-hmm.
like you're not using a product, you are the product.
Correct.
When it comes to Facebook, they are selling your eyes and your gaze to advertisers.
Correct.
So of course it's like, yeah, this is let's build this on the whole thing of connection and really kind of sell that lie.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think that I've seen amazing things where like people were reunited through
Sure.
social media and all those things, but um that's not why people come to therapy. People come to therapy because they're like, hey, I'm comparing myself to all these curated beautiful pictures
Yeah.
of other people's lives that aren't even real,
Yeah.
and I feel less than. And I have all this social media and I have all these friends and followers, but I'm profoundly lonely
Yeah.
in my life. Or I use social media and I'll be vulnerable on it and I'll tell people all of my like horrific stuff that's going on, and like to me that looks more like a drive-by shooting. Like that's not vulnerability, that's like let me dump and get some likes.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that real vulnerability is like two humans sitting together connecting, responding, mirror neurons going off, like all the things that, and that can happen through screen and Zooms as well. But yeah, I think it's this weird substitute that people are using, and I think COVID's like a really good example of why connection and being around each other is so important, because 2020, like the world got weird.
The world got weird, man.
It got really weird.
The world got.
And I'm grateful for these platforms, right? Because I think they did connect us in a way. But at the same time, it's like, it's a perfect case study of what happens when we're not around each other. Substance use went through the roof, depression went through the roof, completed suicide went through the roof. There wasn't a therapist at that time that I knew who wasn't full, like completely full, their practice. And yeah, I hope that answers that.
It does. It does. It does. It does. So back to you typically don't treat people young. So let's say 18 to adulthood, or even later. Let's say more mature adults. Older adults. Um, what do you are there things in common? Like, are there underlying consistencies in terms of the addiction? Or are they kind of based on like what phase in life are you in? Like, how does that work that you've seen?
And once again, this is more from my practice and not like statistics
Yes,
and
sure.
research. I find that my men and women who are in their 20s, um, it is a lot more of pornography addiction, although I have people later in life who have it too. Um, that like the way they experience sex is not relational. It is very much through a screen. Um, and then some of the older clients that I have, I see that more of like the classic sex addiction of like I'm using escorts or infidelity or um
Do you think it's just because of what they grew up with? Do you think it's just different like
preference.
culture? Yeah.
Yeah, culture, preference, accessibility, like I'm working with someone who's, later in life, and they're like, yeah, when I looked at porn, it was like the Playboy that you stole from the store down the street.
Yeah.
And it was this like physical thing, and then you talk to someone who's like 22 and they're like, I have this magical box in my pocket
That
that
shows me
gives
anything.
any possible thing that I can think of. It's like rule something. If you can think about it, porn's already made it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the most creative industry out there. Seriously, Hollywood. There's no big studios that are turning down any scripts or any projects or anything like that. They just make everything.
everything, anything you can think of. So I see that vast difference. I will say a lot of my older, I don't want to call them older, but people like 30s and above, usually come into treatment because of like infidelity.
And they got caught, or because they chose
There was
to.
discoveries, sometimes because they chose to, but a lot of the time like there's like this thing that happened, a discovery, getting caught, which for a lot of people like can sometimes be a relief. Like I can finally like stop this.
You almost want to get caught.
Yeah. Um, Whereas like my younger clients are like, hey, I'm getting older and I'm really struggling to find a partner. Um, and right now my partner is my screen, so I see like that difference a lot. Um, and yeah, and then I also work a lot with like betrayed partners.
Those are people that have been cheated on.
And that can be because my partner never cheated on me with a person, but has spent hours a day looking at pornography.
I was about to. So I want to talk about that. I literally just wrote cheating and morality right here.
How is that defined?
Let's talk about that. What do you think? Personally, and then you can tell me clinically or from your experience. Personally, what you think, and then because I'm curious what you think about this. Do you think that someone is watching porn is a level of cheating? Like let's say cheating is you have a scale from 1 to 10, and you have like a kiss would be a 4, and sex is a 10, and or a whole life together is a 10. Say maybe sex is a 7 or an 8. Would porn be like a 3, a 4? Like, is that considered even cheating? Like, what do you think?
I love that scale because it's like, am I a little bit cheating?
Yeah,
Am
because
I a lot of it cheating?
it's not
Am I
people don't look at things like they're yes or no. They're not what's the word for it? 0 or 1. It's not one or the other. I feel like everything, all this stuff is a scale, especially when it comes to subjective relationships, right? Like everyone's really. So what do you think?
If I, it's hard for me to answer what it is for me personally. That's a vulnerable thing to answer.
Sure.
Um, if I have 10 couples in a room, I have 10 different definitions of it. Like one couple might like say porn's a 0. Like that doesn't bother me. But another couple is like, you know what, porn's a 10 because they know that when we're actually making love, you're not thinking of me.
Ooh.
You're disassociated. And in order to reach orgasm, you have to think about past videos and the disconnect that that has and the way that that can make a partner feel of like, I'm not good enough, and the way like self-blame comes in of like, I'm not good enough to entice you sexually, not realizing that it has nothing to do with you. It is the reward center of the brain has been completely hijacked.
Yeah.
um so like I've seen that. um and then sometimes, you work with couples who have open marriages, and cheating was really like the dishonesty that came along with it, right?
So
Or
they'd be okay with being open, but as long as you're not lying to me about it.
yeah, absolutely. There's
Fascinating.
so many different things. Or yeah, infidelity. I don't care that you're with somebody, but if you cross an emotional line,
Oh, it's so interesting.
or you looking at somebody and objectifying them is like, that to me is cheating.
Sure, right. People, my wife makes me look away when we're watching an HBO show,
Yeah.
watching The Sopranos, and they're in the strip club, and then all of a sudden she's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, and then she looks over, and I'm already looking away because I already know that she's going to be pissed off at me. Like I didn't tell you that I watched the show 4 times already. And notice that I know when to look away already before it even happens. But
Well, and that like my desire, my attraction, like
yes.
these are really sacred, beautiful things. And like, do I have an agreement with my partner that my desire and attraction is for them? Right?
So I think that communication needs to be.
100, like,
So you have to have a conversation and say, this is what's acceptable to me and this isn't, and that could be responded to. I say, well, I counter this, I counter that, this is, I don't, why did, or I think it should just be a conversation as opposed to not even, again, no one talks about it. My
no,
wife and I did not talk about porn
no,
before we got married.
yeah.
We did not talk about it. It actually came up because another one of her friends was dealing with something else with someone else that they knew, and then it kind of just came up and got, oh, like, oh, is that a thing? And like, but like, we're already married. We already have a kid. Like this is not like, and I blame I mean, I take responsibility for the fact that it should have been a conversation that I had earlier that I probably was not man enough to have. I had a lot of other hard conversations, but
Mm.
I think it's important.
Yeah. And I kind of going back to like the love addiction stuff we were talking about too. Like I've had clients like, and you see this in the news a lot, where a person will like slowly drain their entire retirement in gift cards to another person that they met on the internet. Like that's how powerful fantasy is, right? And I've never met up with them.
Yes.
I've never seen them. It's pictures. Sometimes it's phone calls. But like, is that cheating? That I've had this
Yeah.
entire emotional affair with this other human and we've never even met.
I think yes. Personally, I would say yes.
Right?
Personally, there's a show called Traffic. Do you ever hear of it?
I have not.
It's on Hulu. It's a woman. She's been on Rogan a couple of times. Mariana Van Zeller, I think is her name, and she does the show's called Trafficked, and she's an investigative journalist, and she goes to the underground. There's 4 seasons. Each one is about 45 minutes to an hour long episode on the underground world.
Hmm.
So, and one of the big things that she did was love scandals. Was that people apparently Ghana has a huge culture of, they have scripts and books and videos, and they get and they West Palm is a huge location for wealthy, lonely, older people that are on dating sites. You get someone, and a lot of times, when they're based on the show, they'd say like, we'd even give these people money and buy them gift cards and give them little things of love and send them flowers and stuff to develop that kind of sense of trust, which is actually, I think, I don't remember we were talking on camera or not about it, but like, to lie to tell a little bit of the truth in order to get away with a bigger lie, you know, to like to throw you a bone so that you could take something a whole lot bigger than that, you know, while you're playing with the bone.
Yeah.
And I think that that happens a lot.
Yeah, it does. And that is like, you know, when I bring up like how devastating like love addiction can be. Um, where like here I am, I'm being scammed, and sometimes I paint green or I paint red flags green because like it felt really good when like you did show up for me,
Hmm.
right? Like when I got that bone. Um, and just how that plays out, right? And it's kind of going back to, you know, me, I'm married for 50 years and we're kind of roommates at this point. We still love each other. But now I've met one of these people
Yeah.
online and I'm having this entire thing that only exists in my mind. Like, did I cheat on my
That's one of the
partner?
most complicated. That's one
It's
of the most complicated. Do you get cases like that
yeah. Yeah.
where people come in and they say, "We are just roommates. It feels like our like I feels like I just like live with this person. Our relationship is not where it should be, and what do you expect me to do?"
Sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. And
Wow.
sometimes it can be like a catalyst that propels this couple into like a completely different relationship,
Hmm.
which I've seen be really beautiful too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have all these like I'm a CSAT, I'm EMDR, I do all these things, but like at my core, like I am a therapist who specializes in connection and intimacy. And whether that's building more connection with myself, with God, with the world around me, with my partner, with parts of me, my sexuality, my desire, all these different things. Like that is, I am so excited that I get to do that with people. Because I see a lot of people do the work and start to experience connection to all these different things in really new and beautiful ways.
Yeah.
So that like, yeah, I kind of I get all types of stuff, but really at its core, it's all of that.
So tell me about the couple dynamics.
Yeah.
Now that we're here, I love this. I'm excited because this is. I feel like this is like it's all. I don't want to call it fun, but there's more dynamic. It's when you have two living, breathing, conscious parties that are involved, the emergent potential of like what could happen or the potential toolbox that you have to like pull out has to be so much more complicated and so much more diverse, right? Because this isn't a 18-year-old kid that's sitting across from you. There's a couple that's been married with 4 kids for 20 years or for 30 years or something like that. Or there's a couple that's been together for 5 years, you know, and is just starting out their lives together, you know. What do you find? What do you think?
Um, it's funny. Like I love doing it, but I also like uh, I get a lot of anxiety around it too. um, I a friend of mine used to say this to me all the time back in the day. He said, "If you want to know what's wrong with you, get in a relationship." And I do believe that. I think I kind of see it in like through a spiritual lens. I feel like whoever we're partnered with, whether that person is there for life or for a season, um, I see it in the sense of like we are drawn to the people who are going to teach us a lot about ourselves. We are going to trigger each other. Like talking about attachment, like anxious and avoidant always tend to find each other. you
Anxious
know,
and avoidant tend to find each other.
tend to find each other. Um,
That's interesting.
yeah, and it's because
What other kind of opposing traits tend to find each other?
um, well, I think too, it's like we can recreate like things from our childhood. We can like fall in love with the things we swore we'd never fall in love with that were in our caregivers. Or we can do like the reaction formation of like, I'm going to go to the opposite,
Yeah,
which is still being controlled by it,
sure.
right? Yeah, like, and I'm not an imago therapist, but I think that they do a really good job of exploring that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I've noticed that, especially in like in the sex addiction world, that like when you start to kind of peel back the layers, it's like, oh my gosh, you guys were like always meant to find each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the sense of like, you can have like one of a person who's you find out later in sessions that like, oh yeah, like my parent was a sex addict, and like unconsciously fell in love with a sex addict, right? Um,
there's stuff like that that really blows my mind. I was in high school. This is my first exposure to something like this. And when I was in middle school, this is like the world I grew up in was very sheltered, very wholesome. But and I'm sure an enormous part done by my parents, right? They purposely, intentionally kept me very innocent, which I really like. I had no idea how much I appreciated until I lost that innocence, and I was like, "Wow, that was amazing," you know. But my I remember in seventh or eighth grade, there was two kids. The class was small, it was a small Jewish school, and maybe there was 10, 15 kids in the class. Two kids, one kid's mom slept with another kid's dad, and they ended up getting divorced, and then the parents ended up getting married, right? And I was good friends with actually both kids, and it was incredibly difficult for the guy because they were friends. They were in the basketball team together. They were buddies. They knew each other, and this was big. This was like public news. This was not like just kind of whispers. This was verified, divorced, and like they're living in a house together, remarried, and like, um, and then years later in high school, in I think 12th grade, he was having a hard time with whatever, and he cheated on his girlfriend, and and a bunch of his friends abandoned him for that. And I remember this was towards the end of the year, and like we're like, especially 12th grade, and like you don't know what life is going to be happening. You're mature enough to know that like you got to be mature, but you're not mature enough to know what that means. And so we're sitting around a bonfire, kind of just like contemplating life. I'm always have my heart broken. I think my heart broken. My heart was broken at that point, and I was like, why? Like you saw what one parent did to the other. Like how can you do that? And he's like, hey, he looked at me. He goes, I have no, I swear to God, he goes, I have no idea. I just felt like this incredible, just like pull, just like I just needed to do it, and like it was just something like it was like I just had to it just had to happen. And he goes, and I felt like a piece of shit about it, but I just couldn't pull myself away from like that's the thing I needed to do. And I don't know where and I hope he's doing. The truth is, I haven't kept in touch with him, and I hope he's doing well. But I feel like that's a lot of people where you end up, like, but you go through something that hurts you and something that like you see has such detrimental effects. Like, what pulls us to like pursue that ourselves? I don't know, and it's scary because until we figure that out, we're kind of doomed to keep on repeating the same thing, right?
I think life has this really amazing way of bringing up the same stuff. The script's different, the characters are different, but the themes are the same until we like figure it out.
Yeah.
And like I hear that, and it's yeah, because I see that thing happen all the time, right? Like I grew up with an alcoholic parent, and I swore that I would never drink, and then I'm in my 20s and I'm going to rehab because now I'm an alcoholic, right? Like we become the thing that we resist.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, you know, two things came up for me while you were sharing that, and one was like sometimes like we revisit the scene of the crime and we like play different roles. Um, and I think the other thing that comes up for me is like the carbon triangle, which is especially like you see it kind of I see it a lot in divorce where um, you have the perpetrator, the victim, and the savior, right? And one parent cheats, they become the perpetrator, right? The parent who was not cheating, they're the victim.
Yeah.
Right. And then the kid is forced to pick a side, so they become the savior to the victim. Right. And then it's this dance that people kind of go back and forth in. And I think a lot of us can get trained in that relationally as children, as teenagers. And then here we are in our relationship and our, when we're 19, 20, and we shifted into
or 30 or 40, which you hope, hope not, I'd rather, you hope not.
And we can find ourselves like doing the same roles that were taught to us as kids, switching around. And I remember I heard someone say this, like, I can play all three roles in an afternoon. Like, especially with shame, like I can really talk negatively to myself, which I'm the perpetrator. Then, the beer becomes my savior.
Yeah.
And I'm really my own victim. So I know that came up for me as you were saying that, as we kind of get trained in that and then dance around in different roles and bring that into future relationships until those things are healed.
Right.
And even after they're healed, it still takes a lot of work.
Do your couple stories usually end up well? Usually,
yeah, most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like, divorce doesn't happen and people don't separate it. But for the most part, Most people come in because they want to stay together.
It feels like cheating is like the ultimate abandonment of a relationship, right? Like I feel like, you could do like a bad husband or wife could get away with a lot of things, they could get away with not being present, with spending money recklessly, with not being emotionally active or invested. They can get away with like bad friends or bad community. And like, there's like a line with like cheating that like you can't, like, it's very, very difficult to get trust back. What do people do to, do you, how do you frame it in such a way that people can try and get trust back after, you know, especially when you're putting in the lens of some kind of addiction, like porn or sex addiction or process addiction like that?
Well, firstly, like I remind people that like trust is yours to give somebody. Like it's not theirs to have. Like that's yours. Because I think it's like that's like one of the first things is like, oh, this is my thing that I have in a relationship and I need to protect it, you know. Um I first and kind of what you were saying earlier, I think of like Esther Perel when she talks about like how the old shame was divorce, and now the new shame is staying in a marriage when you can leave, right? And we've seen that kind of shift in culture. Um, it is so first to kind of go through like a bunch of stuff to answer your question about
Yes,
trust.
let's do it.
Um, so first thing is, especially with sex addiction, there's a couple ways that like people find out. There are discoveries, which is I saw the lipstick on the collar. I went through my wife's phone and I saw the text messages. You forgot to delete your browser history, like all the things. And these discoveries can be incredibly painful. And they're usually followed by like a short um, disclosure that's not a whole disclosure, but it's enough to like let you know, like, hey, this is what happened. And you see this with a lot of couples that they will go through so many of those and it becomes like this death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah.
We know that it is a horrific thing to keep experiencing that every couple of months. Yeah,
It's heartbreaking.
to want to believe your spouse. And on top of that, then there's like things like the gaslighting, right? Where like there's the lipstick on the collar and I'm convincing you that it's yours, you know? Or I know you saw the browser history, but that was from before.
Hmm.
And where you get somebody who loves you to question their own reality and they start to go crazy from it.
That's the me. I feel like that's the most terrible thing that you could do to someone.
Yeah, it's a form of abuse.
It's yeah, but it's more than it's like, because not only are you shattering, because I think there's like in any kind of relationship, there's the individual components and then there's the relationship at large, and you're shattering the relationship at large and the other individual at the same time, and that is like it's one thing if you're going to break your relationship, and that is sad and terrible in its own, for its own reasons and its own way. But like to make someone else think for years that they're delusional, or from just constantly feed them half truths that make them doubt themselves every step along the way is like such unnecessary harm.
And the omitting,
Yeah,
because I'll let you develop a story that I know is not true.
yeah.
Um, and to kind of come over onto the addict side a little bit, it's survival. It's I am in this constant state of survival. This thing that I do is the way that I cope with life. Um, I'm terrified of losing my partner. I'm in this fight or flight all the time, and so I use gaslighting and I use lying. And I'm not saying this is okay. I'm just saying like
Yeah.
it becomes a tool, and where it becomes unconscious too. Where like I just lie so much I don't even know what the truth is anymore.
Yeah.
Um, so it's I have like compassion for both sides.
Yeah.
Because especially when I'm sitting with the addict and we're doing that work, like the amount of shame and guilt and self hatred that comes along with realizing like I did this thing compulsively and I couldn't stop. Um, it breaks your heart. And then you sit with the betrayed partner who's like, I don't know what's real anymore,
Hmm.
and I've lost my mind. And this isn't just with sex addiction, this is with substance use, this is
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
um a parent loving a child who's addicted to heroin. Like it's these dynamics kind of they play out a lot. And then how do you build trust when these things are happening and you've had a death by a thousand cuts? So usually somebody comes into treatment and like some sobriety is established. Um, I so what we do next is what you would call formal disclosure. And usually the partner is working with a CSAT, and the betrayed partner, and the sex addict is also working with the CSAT. And you roughly begin to do that work, or you roughly have a disclosure around the 3 to 6 month part. Like anymore, it's can be really cruel to the betrayed partner who's like, I'm just trying to like get some clarity. Um, and it is a really rough process. Because it's really like the betrayed partner is like they come up with the questions.
What's a room like? What's it like being in that room? Is it like there's a blanket on the room? Is it crying? Is it dark? Is it exhausted? What, like how does
All
it
of the
feel?
above, but like then also at times where it's like really vulnerable and connecting and beautiful. Um, it's like
Does that weigh on you at any point?
yeah.
It does.
Yeah. I can over empathize. That's like my
Sure.
and I have to like constantly work on that. Where I'm like, hey Chris, this is not yours to feel. And it can be a
What do
lot.
you do? What do you do to channel? I guess to kind of shift away from that, or to
My own work.
you know,
I see a therapist.
there you
And
go. That's helpful.
I do a lot of consultation and I do a lot of supervision with other therapists.
Do you write? Do you exercise? Do you do things like that?
Exercise. I try to eat healthy. I I've been doing this like where I go to Delray Beach every morning and I watch the sunrise and I go for a walk there.
Nice. And you could probably do it at a decent time too, right? It's like 7:30.
I go around like 5:36. I like it like when it's dark.
Nice.
I like what am I doing to feed my soul? And then the boundaries that I have, like I'm not answering calls or emails after a certain time. I'm not working on these days no matter what. Um, I'm saying yes to things even when like my nervous system's like I want to lay in bed and watch TikTok for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
like just bed rot.
Yes.
And instead I'm like, no, I'm going to go out with my friends and I'm going to like talk about things that are not super traumatic
Yeah.
for other people. And then oscillating back and forth of like dealing with the stuff that comes up for me and then like, yeah, I'm going to go have the cheesecake.
Nice.
You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, just like a lot of regulation, a lot of grounding, a lot of that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Anyway, yeah. Um, so we're talking. So relationships, trust, the room's heavy. A lot of times, once that happens, so I guess when people are going to therapy, it shows that they want to try, right? It shows that they want their relationship to work.
Absolutely.
Do a lot of people come to you after after their marriage is already falling apart, and they're like, "Well, now I need to get this solved because I don't want this to be my life." Or, yeah,
I like in all stages. If people who've already separated but like want a full disclosure.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
so
that's
that
interesting.
like so that they can
I
like
bet.
stop questioning themselves all the time.
I think the partner probably owes it to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's these other parts of it which are like the impact.
Yeah.
Um, and where the betrayed partner like gets to say like, hey, um, this discovery impacted me like this.
Hmm.
My relationship with my own sexuality has changed because of this. Like me not feeling good enough sexually, like I could ever compete with whatever the thing was, and thinking that was mine. I inherited that from you,
Yeah.
right?
Oof.
The self blame that comes with it.
Hmm.
There's all these kind of domains that are really interesting to explore. Um, and the betrayed partner really gets to own that, and then there's restitution, where the addict is like, hey, I'm going to validate you and I'm going to, you're absolutely right. This is what I did to you. This is what my gaslighting did to you. And I see that. That can be such a powerful process. And the goal is to make it as least traumatic as possible, even though it can be a really traumatic process.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Last question. Two
Please.
last questions. Number one, we talked about it a little bit in passing. You actually brought it up before I did, but I'm happy you did when we met. Kosher phones.
Yeah.
And social media. So I want to just talk about that, and then I want to ask you about what's next for you. But that'll be the last question. So let's talk about kosher phones and to explain what a kosher phone is, because you brought it up to me. So you have to educate me and and then social media and stuff like that. Because I know for myself, again, that I mentioned to this to you when we met last week, that sometimes the biggest triggers for me, the biggest challenges that I have will be a half a second social media clip on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is, where like something just like flashes across the screen, triggers my like boom, that's attractive, that's whatever, blah blah blah, and I just like I feel the hijack just happen.
And that's when like social media is like, is that in my red or is that in my yellow? Like
social media is in a hard red, and unfortunately it's still there. But yeah.
Or like what do I have in place? Another CSAT actually, and I've been meaning to do this with my phone. She does it where her iPhone, if she's on an app for 15 minutes, you can set a timer.
Yes.
It'll kick you off. And I didn't know that existed, so I need to use it.
Yeah, I use that. I had that for when I had Twitter and I had X on my phone. I put 45 minutes a day for X and Instagram. But the problem is that you could still like just go past. You could just ignore it if you want. Like you could be like, and that kind of also feeds into that whole like shame, process where you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot, and you just keep on clicking like, okay, another 15 minutes, another 15 minutes,
And what's interesting in that is like, I know it's 15 minutes of disassociation followed by like a couple second break. I would invite people to notice what it's like in their body, in their mind, when they're kicked off, what it's like wanting to get back on, and then what it's like when they get back on. And just to like really be present.
That's too challenging.
But it's like I felt my cortisol rise.
Yeah.
And then I felt it go down. Yeah, it's that's such an interesting process. I've worked in I've worked at a couple different treatment centers. I've worked a lot with Jewish communities, Orthodox communities, Hasidic communities, with these issues, with mental health, with substance use. And kosher phones came up like a while ago, and I love them.
Yeah.
Because it's
explain what they are, if you don't mind.
Where I don't have access to the internet. It could be a flip phone. I know that there's like, I have really smart clients who are like, I can get pictures still.
Yeah.
And I can like do things like that. But it is like, I look at it as
even that at that point, the degree of the damage done is similar to like having to run down the block to get a Playboy magazine as opposed to going on your phone and watching a hardcore pornography video.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of like putting as many barriers between me and the thing as possible.
Yeah.
Because like I can't just reach for it in my phone anymore. I have to walk downstairs to the computer.
Correct.
Right. So it's for some of my clients, and this is like a really difficult thing to navigate because these are so addictive. And I'm holding my phone right now. I have two phones.
Yeah.
Which is,
I've contemplated getting a second phone, and I can't bring myself to do it.
I did it to separate like work and.
Do you find that it works well?
Yeah.
You have a good job. You can do a good job compartmentalizing it.
Because I put my work phone on the charger, and then I'm like cut off from it. And when it was on my phone, it was just constantly text, things like that.
Cool.
And now I can like really take a break. But having that conversation with like, hey, is your smartphone like something that we need to put in the red circle? No, it's not.
It's such a hard sell, right? It's
Yeah.
such a hard, how do you sell it?
I let it play out. Everything I do is invitation. Although I did find out that suggestion, when you look it up, one of the definitions is subtle command.
Oh man! But so you're just a propaganda artist.
Everything I do is invitation, and it's really like in a non-judgmental way of like letting people kind of come to it on their own and like, hey, this isn't forever. Like right now, to establish like sobriety, like maybe we need to switch phones. And I've had a lot of people who like were like, that will never happen, and then come into my office 3 months later, they're like, yeah, I had to get rid of it.
I really want to do it.
Yeah,
I really, really want to do it, and I tell myself I can't because I work for my phone and emails and blah blah. But 95% of the time, wherever my phone is, my laptop is, and I
Mhm.
don't necessarily need for that to be the case.
And when you're not doing it on a smartphone, like people become like amazingly like they can get their emails done and like they can okay, I'm going to answer them from this time on my computer and
But I'll even enjoy going to the supermarket more. I'll even enjoy going to driving to the gym in the morning. Like when I'm
Mhm.
driving to the gym in the morning and I'm not scrolling on Twitter, I'm not checking
Mhm.
to see the next text or notification that I'm getting, and I can just enjoy the drive for the drive, and I can just enjoy the activity of being in the supermarket. When you talk to a cashier, when you say hi to someone that's like get you reaching for the same thing as you, like
Mhm.
those are like sparks that make your day, that
Yeah.
like that make us human. And our phone separates us from those. I know for myself, I got my headphones in, I got my podcast that I'm listening to, I got the music I'm jamming out to, I'm on the phone talking to whoever it is, and I'm ignoring the entire world around me. I never feel better about doing that. Like I don't walk out, and I don't walk away and be like, that was a full experience. I walk away and I'm like, what did I just do? Like where did the time just go?
Absolutely. And I think of the study I was reading not that long ago where they show cortisol rising in people's bodies the minute they put their phone down. And then when they pick it up, the cortisol starts to lower.
Yeah.
Right. And to be that physically addicted to
Hmm.
something terrifies me. Um, so yeah, that's the first thing that comes up. And then I think about I went to this retreat like 6 or 7 months ago where we were not allowed to have our phones for 6 days.
It's a long time.
It was a long time.
What was day two like, or three? Because I feel like after that it gets easier, right?
It did. I like the phantom vibrate. Like I could feel my thigh vibrate all the time. I would reach for it all the time. Someone would bring up something I didn't understand, and I'm like, oh, I want to Google that. Like there's just so many things throughout the day. By the last day, they gave us our phones back that night. And I had just connected with these complete strangers who like became my family in 6 days. It was like this really deep therapy retreat thing. And we all were like, I don't even want this.
Yeah.
And the amount of connection that came as a result of not having it and all the work that everybody was doing
Yeah.
was absolutely phenomenal. And admittedly, I feel like I'm I'm in a good place.
Just
Sometimes,
say you're gonna get you keep a
sometimes
smartphone for work and you get a kosher phone for
for
for,
real
for
life.
life. Yeah.
But no, it does.
If you do it, I'll do it.
There,
Okay, we'll
I
hold each
love
other
that.
responsible for that. Okay, we'll go to AT&T. We'll get one of those phones or Verizon whatever with Waze on it. So that's because that's all you really need. And then you got your work phone for work, and you got your kosher phone for to live a healthy life.
And what's so sick is like,
Is that you're not gonna do it?
no, like I
I'm just
agree
kidding.
with you
Yeah,
100%. I know that doing what you just suggested would make my life so much better,
yeah,
right? Than my relationship with things. And there's a part of me that's like, don't don't even look at it.
yeah.
Like, don't look at my phone. It's and there's a part of me that recognizes that like that is totally valid, and I'm gonna sit with it and really think about it.
Well, take me up on it if you decide.
I will, because that is yeah, it's yeah, I love that. I have to really sit with those two parts of myself and let
Yeah.
them fight it out.
I'm sure it'll be fun. I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll be quite. Do it in the morning. Do it, in your sunrise hangout. Just think about that.
I try to. That's actually like one of my best friends. She turned me on to it. Like slow mornings, where I'm not looking at a screen, I'm not checking emails. The first thing I'm doing is not picking up my phone. I'm making coffee. I'm going to the beach to watch the sunrise. I'm talking to God. Like I'm doing all these things that like really center me for the day. And then I have the mornings where I pick this up and I want to look at TikTok,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and that wakes me up, you know. And the way that it messes with my cortisol through the day, like it's a noticeable difference.
I kind of feel like I use it. I'm if I know I have to get up and like be up and about, I'll jump on my phone first thing. And if I know that like I have a long morning ahead of me or like it's okay, then I'll leave it on the side and I'll take my time. But like I try to go to jiu-jitsu 2 or 3 times a week, and like those mornings where the alarm goes off at 6 and like I don't want to get up, and I know that I really do want to get up, and so like
Mhm.
I'll hop my phone and check my notifications. It just flips my brain right on,
Yep.
and I know it's probably
It's
not even a
better than
healthy.
coffee.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, but I don't even know if it's a healthy um acceleration, you know, to go from just waking up, wanting to go back to sleep, rolling over, and then be like, whoop, like, you know, what notifications did I get? What's happening in the world on Twitter, you know, and like, um, but yeah, I think I prefer for it to not be the case. So what's next for you? What do we hope? What do we hope is going to be the case in a year or 5 or 10? What do we generally hoping for?
Um, I That's such a good question. I think I will always in some way have like a private practice. Like I love that I get to do this.
Mhm.
I think I said earlier I'm training in somatic experiencing and psychodrama right now. Like they're two modalities that I find so exciting, especially with doing this work. So I know that those are my next kind of like credential accomplishments. Um, I want to go back to school.
Yeah.
I want to go back to school, either a PhD or a DSW. I want to do research and practice. I want to do research around arousal template. This work
Fascinating.
endlessly fascinates me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I would also one day like I want to teach.
You want to teach?
I do.
Teaching is awesome, by the way. I love
I
teaching.
Yeah, I've done it in like group therapy where I'm like teaching concepts and things like that. But I had a professor who said to me, he's like, I knew I wanted to help people and I wanted to teach people how to help people, and I was like, that you just articulated exactly what I want.
Yeah,
So
beautiful. Yeah, well, I think you'd be a great teacher. I think you'd be wonderful. Even just based on this conversation, there's a class. You know, there's it's a 2 hour master class on master class. It's a 2 hour class on all this. And I think it's really I think that these conversations help with the feeling of loneliness and isolation, and that I'm the only person in the world that has this problem, and I'm the only person in the world that no one gets what it's like to, you know, to like have these urges, and like, you're just a person, you're just a guy, you're just a girl, you're just a man, you're just a woman, you're just an adult, you're just a human being, and like, we have that, and like, you can like I know that, you know, I know that it's hard, you know that it's hard, you know, and we can work through it together, you know. And I think that bit of hope is just so valuable.
absolutely, and I love that. Thank you.
Chris, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it. It's
thank
such
you
a
for
pleasure,
having me.
and I hope we do this again. We'll do this again, I'm sure. And as we're going different points, you know, different points in life, and as you're up to different things and learning new things, and hope you text me and be like, "Hey, I just, you know, I got some fun new things that I want to do on I want to talk about. We can do a podcast to that again."
I would love
But this will be next time. Next time, I'll have to come up to you, make that trip up to West Palm. But thanks so much for doing this. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
All right, bye everyone.